He's back. Keith Thurman has finally made his return to the ring for the first time in over 3 years, stopping Brock Jarvis in the 3rd round. But what really happened to Keith Thurman?
So Thurman coming back from a long layoff after 3 years of him fighting Mario Barrios, coming to beat Brock Jarvis in the very 3rd round. There wasn't too much time, so we weren't really able to see how much ring rust he still got and how much he was able to get off. Many people thought that Brock Jarvis won those very first 2 rounds, and then Thurman hurt him bad with a very nice combination, landed an uppercut, dropped Brock Jarvis, and then finished him with the 2nd drop. But this is definitely a very good sign to see that he's able to beat, I would say, lower competition for sure than him in that quick of a manner, especially coming off that long layoff. And technically this is his first stoppage since 2015, pretty much 10 years ago, which is pretty insane. The key now for Thurman is to stay consistent, to keep on fighting from here on out. He is 36. His best years are most likely behind him. He's a very talented fighter, and especially in his prime, he could have done big things, but unfortunately right now it doesn't seem like that's the direction things are going. This was a card on a Wednesday, way early in the morning EST, and yes, it was his first fight in a very long time, but still there's gonna be work to do from here. But I'm sure he'd still be able to get high level opposition and competition to put him back into the scene and title contention potentially, but it's all going to depend on how consistent he keeps on fighting.
Yeah, it's kind of insane to see Keith Thurman pretty much fighting in the middle of the week in Australia. Looks like they're trying to set up a fight between him and Tim Tszyu again, which obviously that fight was scheduled last year. That ended up not happening, and Tim ended up fighting Sebastian Fundora, losing a close decision where he had that nasty cut. Then recently having that upset, shocking, brutal loss to Bakhram Murtasaliev. And Keith Thurman was fighting free on YouTube, at least in America, in Canada. And that's crazy to see, because at one point he had a lot of potential and he was beating the likes of Sean Porter, beating Danny Garcia, obviously losing a decision to Manny Pacquiao after getting dropped in a round. But Manny is a legend, and it's insane. That's his only loss on his professional record to date. And the guy went pro so early at 18 years old. Had a lot of potential, had a lot of promise, and was fighting very active, especially in the middle of his career. But then it seemed like he kind of got riddled with injuries, him not able to get the fights he wanted, the matchmaking. So this is really his last chance to get in the mix. If anything, maybe it's kind of passed him by. His best years, his prime years, were kind of just him sitting out 3 years off back to back, as he took 3 years off before fighting Mario Barrios and schooling him, then took 3 years off and now had this kind of tune-up fight against Brock Jarvis in Sydney. So we just need to see him active. It's really just going to depend on that. If he is going to want to go on one last run, he is going to have to be active. He is going to have to fight a little bit more. I want to see him in the mix with the likes of Errol Spence Jr., maybe Jermell Charlo, Tim Tszyu, as I mentioned. There's definitely big options for him, and it's really now or never for Thurman.
Yeah, on the one hand, you might think, oh, maybe since this fight was so quick, he didn't really get the time in there, that maybe he should have another tune-up fight or something of that sort. But at this point, I really don't know if that's even possible for him or should be advised at all, just because of the limited time he has. And especially going on this age, it's only more likely from here on out that you receive more injuries and things of that sort and aren't going to be 100% going into fights. It would definitely still be risky for him already being as inconsistent fighting as he is, and with all the injuries, to be having another tune-up fight. And I'm sure after this performance, reminding the world a little bit of who he is and that he's still in the mix, being able to stop guys early, he could get a good fight, he can get a big fight. Big fights are happening in boxing all the time now, partially thanks to Saudi and other things. There's no reason why a guy with a solid resume like him and all the talent wouldn't be able to get a good opponent for his next fight. But for sure, it's going to be up to him to see if he feels he's ready for that.
Yeah, I really liked actually what he was doing in this fight. He did great work, those uppercuts on the inside. He even took a little bit of resistance from Brock Jarvis in those first couple of rounds. And Jarvis wasn't just in there to lay over, he was landing some decent counter punches, especially early on Thurman. It was only a 3-rounder, so we didn't get to see that much. It wasn't that competitive, but while it did last, Jarvis was in it for the first couple rounds. Thurman was kind of lunging and overextending on a couple shots, but he does still have that pop. He does still have that fast twitch. He's still going to be a threat for a lot of these guys. He put Jarvis down with some nasty shots, stopped him, showed that killer instinct, showed that dog, but we just got to see him more active. Like you said, Thurman showed he still got it. He didn't look that bad. And the fact that he's fighting in Australia kind of tells you that they're looking to set up that Tim Tszyu fight. He was on commentary, and That's really the logical next fight for Keith Thurman, but you gotta think it's gotta happen soon. You gotta think he wants to get back in there, and I like the work he was doing in this fight. He's just gonna need to up the level of competition a little bit more to get back in the mix with these high level guys. Thurman definitely has a lot of promise. It's just a shame when you see his career kind of just fly by without him really fighting the who's who, without him fighting the top guys at welterweight or super welterweight now it seems like he might be fighting at.
And potentially one thing for Keith Thurman going forward, if he is going to be fighting some of the elite fighters, when you go towards the more of the lighter divisions, it's really the speed and the youth and as well durability that is able to withstand them against top guys and for the rest of their career. But now that Thurman is 36 and is very inactive, definitely not going to be the sharpest just by naturally not having the fights that he's probably wanted to for all these years. Against the guys that have been doing this, been at the top, having these recent experience of fighting high level guys, is he really going to have the same speed, the same sharpness, the same effectiveness against some of these guys as he did maybe in his youth? That's definitely going to be one of the biggest question marks. For him to come back though and still wanting to prove that he's still a top dog is commendable. And he must still be very confident in his abilities. Like you said against Brock Jarvis, he still showed he's got gas left in the tank. His combinations are still crisp, he still can deal damage. But again, it is different when you're comparing it against Brock Jarvis, who is a decent fighter, but he's just not the elite of the elite.
Yeah, Keith Thurman, even in his prime, really wasn't active. You've really never seen an active Thurman at the top level. Even since 2015, he's fought 7 times. That's 7 times in the last 10 years, which is just not what you want to see. It's pretty much a part-time thing for him at this point. He had the WBC welterweight title at one point, winning that off of Danny Garcia in 2017. Had big fights like Manny Pacquiao, but he never really had that breakthrough moment, that breakthrough win to really put himself and separate himself from the other guys of his era. And it's going to really be hard to see that happening anytime going forward because, like we said, he's getting older now, up in age. We got a lot of young, hungry contenders coming up through the welterweight and super welterweight divisions. I don't know if he can even really still compete against the champions, the who's who of the division, guys like Terrence Crawford, Sebastian Fundora, Buckram. At this point, it seems like Thurman should just be in it for the big fights, the fun fights, the exciting matchups like the Errol Spences, the Tim Tszyu. I don't want to see him in there with a young, hungry dog like a Virgil Ortiz or anyone like that. It's just, at this point in his career, I don't know if he could really compete at that level right now.
Yeah, and even if he can't fully compete at that level, I'm sure this would still be an opportunity for while he's still able and young enough to make some money from the big events happening right now. And I'm sure he could create enough buzz and have still enough of a valuable name to get the solid fights and still get a decent payday in the end.
But let us know your thoughts in the comments down below on Keith Thurman getting back to the ring and back to his winning ways. But if you enjoyed the video, be sure to leave a like, subscribe, and check out the video on screen on the problem with Shakur Stevenson.